Hey everybody, welcome back. ES holding the 12 SMA, we can see in there, staying above 5,000. Undercut it yesterday and going sideways. We've seen this pattern a couple times. Candidly, I'm really surprised by the strength today. I thought we'd see a little more weakness, a little more follow through, at least to the 22. But you're really opening, and if we just open this up and look at what's happening, tonight's video is going to be really granular. We're going to talk about individual names. There's a lot going on after hours that we need to deal with. So if you can see right in here, look at your levels. It's pretty impressive. So you're sitting right on that 12. For those that are new, I use a 12, a 22, and a 55. You should use what you're comfortable with. RSI broke the 70. All right, so they're the basics, and now we're going to have to drill in a little bit into the sectors. But that's pretty impressive considering. Now people are saying, well, we should have seen yesterday from the close. Yeah, but you had a lot of people that made a lot of money short yesterday, and they came in today, and now they are what? They are long? I don't think so. I don't think you went from short to long in a day. But I do think you had some short covering. I do think that we are seeing some strength in some very specific names, which we're going to get to in a moment. But I think we have to take a look at this for what it is. Maybe we got way overdone yesterday. I mean, we did see RTY down, what, 4%, 5% at one point. And then you slice through, and you're seeing the pattern, right? Up, 1, 2, 3, down. I wouldn't just be, cheering just yet, but this is impressive that we held the 55, you held the 22, you held the 12. You have a lot in here that you held. That's a good thing. I would rather hold and go higher than roll. I just don't know that we're there yet, and I don't think anybody, quite frankly, does. There were some telltale signs today. We'll get into that. But if you look right in here, again, you're holding the 12. So this is what's happening, and this is what we're going to trade tomorrow, and that's all we can do. If you get the higher high, you might see that panic come in a little bit, like, oh boy, we just got washed out of it, and now it's lifting. That is a possibility. And I do want to just review one thing. Now, you have some data coming out, and that data is going to be coming out very, very shortly. We're all aware of it. We have data coming out. Let's go to, and we'll go to right here. We have data coming out with PPI. PPI will be closely watched. It all spurred really from Yellen. I mean, we laugh, but she does move markets, and she did move the market today, even though she did say that things are going to be higher for longer. No matter what she said, they did move the market. So it's kind of interesting. So one of the things that we like to do when you have news, and this was CPI coming in higher than expected, is we mark that 50% line. And this is what we went over in the public video today. You can say whatever you want, but what matters is what price does. So once you got to that 50%, you can see how you bounced yesterday. And this is just that 830 bar from CPI. See that? The undercut, and then the lift, bonk, 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 until what? Support, right? Resistance becomes what? Support, tries, flips, tests, and then you can see it all in here, actually. You can actually see the battle. It's kind of cool when you zoom in on it. You can see how it tested here, and then it failed the retest, tested, held the retest, and then lifted. You can always tell which ones are going to hold. Well, I shouldn't say always, but here's a really good sign. See how when this broke right here, how it just kept going down in these long, red, nasty bars? See how these bars just kept riding that level over and over again? This is the difference between something working off supply, and this is the difference between something else that you just have that seller still up there. So that's the bigger difference right there. You can see it's trying to flip by eating up that supply. So there's definitely a difference there that I pay attention to. You can do what you want with that, but it's certainly something that I've been paying attention to for years, and it does tend to work. So that kind of gave us an indication today which way to go. We did play the long side this morning off the open. That was about the easiest money of the day. I find it very hard to tell people, oh, just go home long, because surely you're going to be up again tomorrow in SMCI. It goes up until it doesn't go up anymore, and that's really the way it is. You closed after hours at 880. You're already up another $17. And I guess at this point, it's kind of funny because I bought puts on this today and made money with the puts. Actually, it turned into a double. It was kind of funny. But when we got up to this point, I was looking at it and like, this is just getting absolutely ridiculous. And so the 800s were really cheap. And I just looked at it and said, for $6, if you start rolling back down here, you should be able to test something in here. So we just put them on. And it was a really tight stop on it in case I was wrong. But once you broke, that was it. And they just worked their way down. I just covered some at 9, covered some at 12. I can pull up the timestamps. I'm not going to because there's too much to go over. But so we scaled out of it, and it is what it is. But in hindsight, it's the same soup reheated. You're sitting there going, oh, look, I made money on the short. But then you just have the simplest things again. Tries to rally, fails, 1, 2, 3, and then it finally breaks through, and it makes that higher high. There's your breakout bar from that DTL, and it ripped from there once again. Just why not another 40, 50 points? Because I don't know. And the only thing that I can think of is that we're so far off. The only thing that makes any sense at this point, and everyone that watches these videos knows I love tech, but the only thing that really makes sense is that we are so off base by how their earnings are priced that this is where they're going. It's the only thing that you can even rationalize, that we are so far away from where this should be priced that this is why it's lifting the way that it is. Now, Goldman had a note about a week ago that they were conservative with their estimates and that they're probably going to have to raise them again. I mean, are you going to have to double them? You're getting to a point here where even the most bullish person is raising their target price like 800, and then you're coming in the next day and then it's at 900. So there may be something out there that we're just not aware of that's doing this. And besides demand and besides people that want to play it because it's so super thin, it is a real company. They do have great earnings. They did crush and knock the cover off the ball. But you kind of look back on this and realize that, you just had to trade from what? You were down here where you were at like 340 all the way up. Earnings came out. Earnings were stellar. And, you're closing this thing at 5.6 for a double thinking you did well. And now look at it. So, after hours, I'm playing around with it again, trading it, and obviously doing quite well at the time of recording this. But overall, do I want to wake up tomorrow and find out that tomorrow is the day? Candidly, I don't know. It's going to be dependent upon how much I'm up. I'll just be candid. It's going to be how much am I up in this by the end of the evening, and do I want to take that risk? Or do I just want to pull money out of it again tomorrow? Because if you're just pattern trading, and let's talk about this because I think this is really important. If you're just pattern trading, there's a lot of little patterns in here you can just play around with all day long. 1 minute orbs, it breaks. You use the low of the 1 minute orb, opening range breakout trades. You guys should be familiar with that. If you're not, let me know and I could just run those. And you can just do VWAP trades all day long off of it too. It doesn't mean they're all going to work, guys. Nothing works all the time, but it's a way to get in and out, pull money out of it while you're trying to figure out what to do with it, right? You can see it. Can't break, retest, goes, breaks, tries, right? And so that's what you're seeing. And then break towards the end of the day. It's usually the end of the day where it's the best, actually, isn't it? Because you always get the minutia between like 11 and 1 where people just really aren't committing, and see where institutions start committing, and they do. They start buying at the end of the day, as always. That's why that one indicator that we used the last hour. But I'm going to pull that up on Saturday's video, by the way. But you can see here, you break out the retest, the buy, and there it is into the close. I mean, there's 30 points there into the close. So does it mean you're going to get the entire move? No. Not unless you're just spraying and praying at this point. But I don't know anybody that's just, that's just going to stay in it and just accept that at this point. And the reason I say that is even if you're let's say you're a total technician, right? Let's say that you bought because you broke the 22 and your stop becomes the 12. You're going to risk $300. To me, it's just absolutely insanity at this point to think about risking that. Unless as it goes up, you're just buying in the money puts, like right behind it, right? Or out of the money puts, like you're buying puts down here. You're coming in, it runs up, you close the puts, and then you just keep doing it, wash, rinse, repeat. Maybe that's what you're doing. But when you start getting to these levels, like, what are you, 100 or what are you up after hours? 130% off the 55-day moving average, it really starts getting hard to justify. Forget about the RSI because it could stay up here forever, right? It is overdone, but you need to watch when it crosses the 70, not just that it's up here. As I said, we're going to get really granular tonight on a couple things. So what do you do with this? You trade it and you keep pulling money out of it until it ends. And eventually, like everything else, it will end. And maybe we'll find out there's a reason that it's doing this. Maybe there's a legitimate reason for it. I have a really hard time with it. I really do, because you crushed. I get it, $20 a share. Are you going to earn 40? Are you going to earn 80? Like, where are we going with this when you start looking at the trailing numbers? And people say, well, you can't justify it. Well, somebody's buying it, right? Someone out there is buying it. You're seeing it at the end of the day. It's not like you're seeing the big run up in the beginning of the day and then the end of the day, the collapse. So there is something to it, and there's certainly something that we should be paying attention to, and I think that that's really important. Now, if we follow its friend, which is becoming NVIDIA, which is slowly coming into fruition as going to be the world's largest company, I get the movement here to some extent. And people will say, how can you say this if you can't do it with SMCI? There's a couple reasons for this. First and foremost, the largest reason that I feel that way is because SMCI, you had earnings, and you've kind of tripled since then in a very short period of time. So how mispriced was it? And I think there's something to that. Doesn't mean it's going to come down, but there should be some level of consolidation. So here's my thought with NVIDIA, and this is where I'm going with this. If I go here on a bear chart and we look at this and we just say, okay, and this is why I was talking about getting somewhat granular tonight. And I think it's important because maybe this is why, it's moving. And maybe we're going to find out why SMCI is moving the way it is. But you had 1, 2, 3 quarters of just blowout, just absolute crushing blowout, beating the beat over and over again and raising the raise and beating the beat over and over again, to the point where organizations are coming out saying they're going to earn somewhere between $40 to $80 in 27. Whether or not you believe that or not, it doesn't really matter. right? It's completely irrelevant what you believe. What matters is what the street believes and what someone's willing to pay. So in this situation, I have a base that's been going on for 3 quarters of absolute crushing earnings. I have something to work off of that's allowing this to happen. The difference here, I don't really have that, do I? Like I'm not gonna say there's no justification for it, but you come and take a look at these, yeah, all right, you're beating, but you're not knocking the cover off the ball, right? This did, obviously, because they raised the rate and you moved the raise. But here you have a reason for it. So are we going to find out that there's something going on with SMCI? There's some kind of partnership. There's something going on there where demand is through the roof. And again, it's all conjecture. And you try to figure out what it is. But this I get, and I get how people could argue this as well and saying, no, this is still too high, X, Y, and Z. And I could make arguments as to why it's not. I mean, Goldman put a beautiful piece together out there where they're talking about, this could be a $1,450 stock if everything goes right in the next 12 to 18 months. So there's legitimate reason why this could just dominate and continue to dominate. And I've said this for over a year now, or about a year now. And what I'm trying to get you to understand is I get this. This I'm having a real tough time with. I'm having a real tough time. And so I'm not really connecting the dots as to why this is going to be able to do what it's doing. And maybe I'll figure it out later, maybe I won't. In the meantime, it's 4 letters and 4 numbers, or now it's 5 numbers, and I'll continue to trade it and we'll go from there. After hours, Tesla, you have this really weird statement by Musk after hours, and people thought it was good news. Good news, I have more shares than I thought I do. I own more of a percentage of the company than I thought I did. How do you not know how many shares of the company you own? It's really a bizarre statement to say the least. For some reason, people got excited and they bought the stock. I just shorted it after hours. You'll probably come back to break even. This is probably one of the silliest reasons to ever see a stock rally, in my opinion, after hours. The founder of the company realized what percentage of the company he owned, therefore the stock's going higher. I mean, you can't even make this stuff up anymore. So I don't really think that this is going to last, but we'll see tomorrow. You never know. You've been in this little island, and whenever you see these little islands, you just want to watch like the high and the low of the original bar that formed the island and see how it goes. And if you really take a look at that, have you ever really closed outside of that bar since it broke down? And here, let me blow this up so you can get it. And that's what I was talking about. Things are going to be pretty granular tonight, talking about the market, so you can kind of see some of this stuff. Have you really done anything here? Right? You had one kind of. So this bar is in control, right? And I think that we could refer to this as a control bar. So what we would want to do with this bar, and what would make the most sense with this bar, is to look at it and go, okay, we're going to pay attention to this bar, and what we're going to do with this bar is relatively simple. We're going to make our decision on what's going to happen with this stock when it starts closing lower lows or higher highs. This thing was all over the place today, but nevertheless, I would be using that as my control bar. Again, very granular this evening. And that's definitely the way that this stuff is setting up. Microsoft popped after hours. I'm going to say it, and I can't believe I'm going to say it with a straight face, because they're going to go after Google with AI to go after their search business. They have been going after Google since Google's been around for their search business. They spent tens of billions of dollars on this. Tens of billions of dollars. You know how far they got with Bing? They got 1%. They gained 1% after 5 years of trying. Okay, Google owns search for now. When Google loses search, it will not be because of Microsoft. It'll be because of some other company. Same thing that happened to Yahoo. Same thing that happened to, Alta Vista. Same thing with when we stopped using Netscape browsers. It's something that we don't even know yet, that we're all going to love and we're all going to have to use. Okay, it's not Microsoft, it's not Bing with its new AI. It just isn't. So the fact that Google is down 2% after hours to me is just kind of really funny. We'll see how it goes tomorrow, but I don't think that this makes any sense whatsoever. Microsoft after hours actually was up about a whopping 30 cents, so you can see how little sense these trades make with Google being down 2%, Microsoft up 30 basis points. So, but again, we're getting really granular tonight, because I think tomorrow it's going to be just, which stocks are moving and how do you trade them. That's really what it seems. After hours, FSLY is just very simply imploding. The quarter in and of itself, they missed on the revenue side, got it much lower. If you look at this after hours, you can see very clearly how this is playing out, and it's not playing out too well, right? Down, conference call ends, and just straight selling after that. Twilio, very similar in its actions this evening, and I think that's worth noting, that you can just kind of see how it's trading right in here as well. Broke down, and now the conference call is over, and then what are we doing? We're just doing the slow kind of the slow death march, I guess is the way that we'll refer to it, and kind of go from there. And I just want to reiterate that before we go into some of the sectors and what's going on internally with the market. One thing I really want to hammer home here, I'm not saying to not trade these. We've been trading these on both sides of the market. I'm trading it at the time of recording this, and I'm trading it after hours. It's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm simply saying is, it's like cigars. Smoke them when you have them, for those that smoke cigars. You trade it until you can't trade it anymore. And right now, it's very tradable. So just keep doing what you're doing. But the idea that this is just going to be miraculous and do that forever is just frolics. But Twilio after hours, it wasn't great. Some of these calls tonight just were not great. Cisco, not so good. So you're starting to see tonight, if we were to go and say, okay, well, who were the big dogs that came out with earnings tonight and how did they do? I think we'd have to say that FSLY, people were looking for, you're down 22%. Twilio, out with earnings, down 11%. Cisco, out with earnings, down 6%. Hubs, you're flat. Oxy's flat. APP was the big winner of the evening, and see how that's going. Starting to move a little bit higher. It was actually a decent quarter, and I would watch that one tomorrow. That could have legs. You're actually trading up. I don't know when the conference call was. I was too busy doing some other trades, candidly. But when you start to see this, you start seeing how these things are acting. Even Upwork, this was a good quarter. Upwork's had some moves off the open, and this thing can move. If you take a look, this was earnings, and you see where it's going on. This was earnings, and you see how it's going. This is not a huge move, so you could see this actually lift tomorrow. And for me, this was a really good quarter. I have done nothing with it yet. Technically, I really like this trade. And if you take a look at that level, you're right there. You're really right there. That's what I was saying about being granular again this evening. So we understand that you had some winners. Overall, you had way more losers, in my opinion, and we'll go from there. If you have a reason or comments that you think or something that I should read, that someone can explain this on SMCI to me, just on a fundamental basis, I'm all ears. Because I've seen this stuff before where I just don't understand the story and it keeps going. But from now, I'm just going to day trade it. Now, let's just keep rocking and rolling here. So we understand that Bitcoin's doing Bitcoin things and it's going higher. Now, what we should be aware of is, if you just take a look from that, you flipped it, 1, 2, 3, and you pushed. Very little to say here, very little to do here. Wouldn't be surprised to see this continue. If you take a look at some of these names like Mara, and we take a look after hours, we're up again. They're all setting up once again to what? Gap up tomorrow. And they're probably going to. They're probably going to run again. MicroStrategies, you're going to see that up again. You're up about $10, $11 after hours, just gapping up and running. So very little to do there and very little to say there. It's just been an absolute beast. And I really don't see a reason for, quite frankly, for that to change. I really think that that is definitely something that we should be paying attention to. I really think that this thing can go a lot higher. I don't think people truly understand the power of this name and not only the stock that they own, or rather the Bitcoin that they own, but I don't think really people understand there's an actual company here that does, about $500 million a year in revenue. So this is always the one that I like, and their position usually trades at a discount to Bitcoin, which makes no sense to me. What do you do now with it? I think, it's one of these things now, when you start breaking out like this, you have to trade it. You have to just kind of hold on and trade it. You just take what you can out of it and you move on that day. And I think that's the best way to approach these right now. I really do. Now, as far as sectors, we're going to go and take a look at this very quickly and just say this was the leading sector. The ones that rolled yesterday, they're the ones that bounced today. They're the ones that came bouncing back. So maybe they were a little overdone, but it's not like you saw fresh money, not like you saw higher highs into these, right? And that's kind of where I'm going with this. You did see higher highs into XLI, which is really interesting because that moves with the dollar. And there was just no care in the world. If we take a look at the internals of the market in and of itself, that's kind of interesting too, because you're kind of wedged in here, meaning if you just look at stocks above their 5-day moving average, S5FD, you can see you're right here at that 45.92. Here are the 20s, you're right at that 50 level. You come here and you look at stocks above the 50-day moving average, you're dead center here. And then you come here and you look at stocks above the 200-day moving average, you're at 66. So it's not like we're way up here and it's not like we're down here. We're really middle of the road. And I think that's very important. If you take a look at value versus growth, they're still selling value and they're still buying growth. That's what this chart's telling us. So when we put this all together, some people will say, well, what about XLY versus XLP? Are we getting defensive? Because you always want to see, are you buying your wants more than your needs? Because if you're not, then this is a clear sign that you have an issue. And when we take a look at this, you can see there's not really an issue here, right? We don't really have like a huge issue. So then you go, okay, well, how about, what else could we use? We could use copper. People love using copper to say that that's what the market's supposed to do. Well, has copper really done anything between 2023, right? And this is, when I see a misnomer or something that I just don't feel is accurate, I just like to point it out. So between 2023 and 2024, what's copper done? How about nothing? So if I was to look at copper and then I'm supposed to come here and just take a look at the S&P and go, okay, well, what's the S&P done? Why copper's done nothing? So should I really be using copper as a decision-making factor in what's going on with the market? Probably not, only if I really want to lose money, right? Probably just do the exact opposite of that would make the most sense. And I don't understand why people are so, really bent on that trade and want to keep it that way, but I don't really understand that. But it is what it is. Anyway, if we take a look at this, it becomes very, very clear that copper is not something that you're going to want to look at. So what about the sectors? What in the sectors are moving? I think we should look at all three. And this video is a little bit longer because there's a lot to go over, but let's just talk about the sectors. Let's get rid of copper here. And what we're going to do here instead of copper is we're just going to drop in the S&P. And then we're just going to look year to date and just see where you're at from 24 over, but let's drop it on a 15 so that it's a little bit. So let's get to that. Not February. I want to go to 24 first and just start there because I think this is important for you to see, what's really working since 24. So this is 40 sectors and you can start seeing where the leaders are since then. So the stocks, Internet, XLC, IGV, which is your SMCI kind of names. That's what's really going on in there. They're the ones that are actually moving, and you can see that pretty clearly in there. And then you start getting into your other names like Block, and you can start seeing healthcare. And we actually did a piece on this and why healthcare is moving the way that it is. I don't want to make this too long because I know it's a weekday video and we try and cut these down, but there is a lot to go over here that I think you need to be aware of before you start going into PPI on Friday and before you trade tomorrow. So then you look at this and go, okay, so since February, what's winning? Well, if someone was going to tell you it's going to be blockchain and solar names, you wouldn't believe them, right? You would not believe that they're your winners. So your three big winners going into February, just so we're clear, are the Bitcoin names, the solar names. You have some big solar names coming out with earnings very shortly, and the China names. So when you start to look at this, it's not what people think it is, and that's why this is so important. If you took a look at this yesterday, and this is one of the things I was trying to get people to understand, like yesterday, nothing was up. I mean, it's very hard to assume, like here's the 13th, if you mark the zero line, there was not one sector, let's make this a line, there was not one sector that was up. So if you're supposed to come in today and feel warm and fuzzy about the market, I'm not entirely sure how you're supposed to do that when you can't even get a sector to lift. It just does not seem like that is the most prudent thing in the world, right? So what does that mean to me? It means at the end of the day, what we really want to do is just look at, okay, what's breaking out? And this is what's breaking out up here. And this is actually clean energy, transportation. So when you start to see these kinds of things, obviously your semis, but just get it. So you have your Bitcoin, right? You have your transports, you've got your clean energy, and you have your semis. And this is really what's running the show right now. So these are the spots that we should look tomorrow and see if that continues. I have a really tough time looking at these charts technically and saying that they're not going to continue. It's very difficult to do that, right? Now, forget this for a second, but it's very difficult for me to look at something like Bitcoin, to look at the Bitcoin names and say that you're not going to have another decent day in these as long as nothing weird happens with Bitcoin overnight. And again, you never know, but it's really hard to look at that chart and expect to see something pretty wonky tomorrow. That's it.